good morning and welcome to The Table. We started this podcast and called it The Table because our table has always been a place that anyone is welcome and we can just be real and just share and talk about life and ups and downs. And it's just always been a place of warmth. And so that's what we want
to
bring. So welcome, Rita Springer.
Yeah.
I tried so hard last night not to turn into fangirl.
Oh, you're
and
so sweet.
I was
like, there's no need to fan out here.
Kind of did in the car a little bit, but I've got it under control now. And I'm really just thanking God for the gift of
sweet.
You to the body and to us for decades. So thank you.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what do you see coming for the church in worship?
Yeah. My first kind of like, is that there's so much, I think, in that question. It's such a loaded question. I think I came off of a year in 2022 where I probably would have had a different answer just based on what I was seeing probably post-COVID. But I think a lot of the stuff that was coming out, some of it, publicly in some of church streams and worship that we've seen and the documentaries that we've seen posted. And I think some of that is just stuff that's hidden, that's brought to the light. And sometimes things like a pandemic will force things into the light.
Right.
And so I have this really beautiful kind of peace that God has a timing on what he brings, but there's always something that he's wanting to do. And that if we get distracted by what makes us heart sick, we can't see the fulfillment of the tree of life. Hope deferred makes the heart sick. And I think I struggled as a worship leader, mother in worship, having really tried to navigate my life in a way of right standing, and seeing what I was seeing, I was just losing heart.
Yeah. And
so I really felt pressed to start praying for the fulfillment of life instead of the hope deferred. And so I do believe that God is really trying to bring us back to, in worship, in the church, the standard of a holiness that isn't kind of in the context of religion, but really bringing back a need for relationship with Jesus.
Right.
It's too obvious when you get on any kind of a social media platform to see the lack of relationship with Jesus.
Right.
The lack of even a younger generation. They don't even know Scripture.
Right.
They don't even open the Bible to read Scripture, to understand Scripture. And I think that has to change, in order for the value and the purity of our stages to be back in the hands of the Lord. And so, how do you do that? How do you encourage a generation to come back to something they don't know? My son's almost 19. He's never had a revival experience. I had the revival experience.
Right.
I mean, I remember when I took him through a fire tunnel. He thought it was a fire tunnel. He thought he might get burned. And I thought, gosh, he doesn't have any kind of a understanding.
There's no context for it.
No, because I was in the Brownsville days. I grew up watching legs grow around campfires and shakalaka boom da and people speaking in tongues everywhere. Even when I was like, that stuff's weird. But I was brought into an understanding of the value of what it really was, and then started walking in the relationship of it and not the religion of it.
Right.
And then my life just exploding in understanding. Well, we don't have an understanding in a generation. The Z generation has no real clear understanding.
Right.
They need an encounter.
Right.
And so part of it is just praying, God, bring encounter. Like bring radical encounter on college campuses. I think that's why Asbury was so important.
Right.
And so important not to get out of control and not to be made something that could just end up down the road, because we've seen that. And I think that that's why I was so protective of Asbury. Like I didn't feel this need to rush down there and be a part of it as an older person. I was like, no, as an older person, I'm going to stand to the sidelines and pray that God just infiltrate these young minds and give them the platform of understanding what true worship really means and the cost of it.
Right.
Because I don't think in the church we talk about the cost of it as much.
Right.
So I that's a loaded answer to probably a very simple question, but that's what I'm praying for, because I want worship to change for a generation that's up and coming.
I think that as we look over the landscape of what God is doing, I'm actually almost excited in a weird kind of way that this next generation doesn't have a context for some of it, because it feels like there doesn't have to be as much dismantling of perhaps a religious type expression, and that coupled with that, there has to be some mothering and fathering that comes alongside, because that zeal that is ignited when they have that encounter with Jesus then needs to be protected and covered and discipled with the word. So I think that... I actually fully agree with that. I think the only thing I think COVID did to this generation, this younger generation, is that he isolated them. And so they're very much focused in a self-consumption and a me focus. Right. And sometimes I'm like, I'd rather have them have a little bit of religious connotation than a me focus. Right. Because it's almost a... I don't need anybody else because I'm my own God. I'm my own this. I'm my own that. And I think therein lies almost like a self-religion that it's the mental part of that, I think, is the thing that's just so earth-shattering to me. It's like, this is so simple. Even having conversations with my own son, it's like, wait. This is pretty simple. Like, this is black and white here. But the way that the isolation causes them to see it is that it's not the black and white that we say. It's like, well, but it could be this, And, I was at Belmont University last week. I had just been asked to speak to a bunch of worship leading students there. And I just kind of walked in and I was just talking like I normally talk. And I felt the Lord say, apologize as a parent for the way they've never been parented and shown the love of Christ. And so I was just kind of talking about this. And then there were all of these these young women in there. And there were like maybe 12 guys. And so I stood the guys up and I'm like, I don't know if Belmont's like into the prophetic, but I'm like, I'm about maybe to start revival here. And I prophesied over these guys. And, guys are like, they're kind of non-emotional. And so, they had their hands in their pocket. But then they started coming up one after the other afterward. And one of them just emailed me and he said he was just shaking on the inside. He just thanked me for having the honesty to stand up as an older person and speak life into what God was doing, because he said, I've never seen anybody do that. And I just was like, oh, where are the mothers and fathers? Like, where are the mothers and fathers of the church that we have stopped? Our generation somewhere lost it. As much as we love our kids and we've parented our kids as under the Lord, it's like, where is our generation parenting these kids? And I think it's really not these kids' fault as much as it's the generation. Agreed.
That just didn't parent them, that didn't teach them relationship, that didn't teach them, just really good, solid, run after Jesus,
Yeah. Well,
anyway.
It seems like we were trying to, be so involved that we allowed, in my opinion, their current interest to become what led us instead of we love Jesus.
Yeah.
And do this.
Yeah.
It seemed like we kind of started worshiping at the God of potential.
Yeah.
Of what our kids might be. They could play in the NBA. They could, go to the NFL. And honestly, what's the percentage of people that actually do that? But all of us can love Jesus well. And if we had started with that, I think we would have been
one of the
more
best things I think the Lord ever said to me when Justice was born, and I adopted him from birth. So I've had him from birth. And I think maybe by the time he was 2, he wanted to be a garbage truck driver. And, when probably all boys want to be garbage truck drivers. They wait for the garbage truck. And that's how I got rid of the pacifier, is we put all the pacifiers in the garbage truck when he was ready to get rid of the pacifier.
Brilliant.
But he wanted to be a garbage truck driver. And I remember thinking, no, you don't want to be a garbage truck driver. And the Holy Spirit just quickened me, and he said, don't ever tell him that what he wants to do isn't the best for him. And he said, in fact, never ask me what he's going to become.
Wow.
And I was like, well, isn't that a parent right? To ask the Lord what their child's going to become? And he said, yeah, but you'd screw it up. And he said, the last thing I want is for you to ask me what he's going to become. And then you, seeing in part, hearing in part, speaking like a legacy over him that isn't really what I said. And then you put on this weight on his shoulders that he feels like he has to become something because God told his mom.
Right.
And he's like, and then he carries a weight that's never been his weight to carry.
Right.
He's like, just don't ask me. Don't screw this up.
Right.
And so I remember the first thing I did was when he said, I want to be a garbage truck driver, I started just saying, oh, you're going to be, I mean, the garbage truck business is going to just go out of control if you're the garbage truck guy, because you're going to be the best garbage truck driver in the whole world. I mean, people from all over the world are going to be like, look at this garbage truck driver. He's amazing. And you could just kind of see him pump up like, you believe I could be the best garbage truck driver in the world? And I saw that thing on his face. He's almost 19, and I've never once asked God what he's going to become. But the Lord said I could ask the Lord the kind of character that he'd carry. And that has actually been, to me, like 101 great parenting. Because, and the other thing that was so, I think, so relevant was such revelation from the Lord, as the Lord said, learn to apologize. He said, when you're wrong, apologize to him, because if he watches you learn how to apologize for the mistakes that you're making, then he realizes how much he can trust you. And so there'd be moments, when I remember I said to him, I think he was in the 5th or 6th grade, and he wasn't studying. He was in a private school, and I was breaking my back trying to keep him there, just because I felt like he was supposed to have this education. And I said to him, if you don't put, study, and if you don't do the work, I will take you out of this school. And put him to bed that night. And man, the Lord came down on me, and he said, don't you ever say anything like that to me. I'm the one that opened up a way for him to be in this school. I'm the only one that could take him out of the school. You can't do anything. I'm the only one that will take him out of the school. So I need you to wake him up now at 11:15 p.m. at night. And I need you to apologize for the way that you said that, because I can't have you partnering with the devil and how to bring him down. And I just was like, and so I learned to live in fear of God the Father. And I was so arrested as a mom with certain things that I would say just out of worry, or just out of like my own insecurities and my own lack of letting God come in those areas of my life. And I mean, we all do it as mothers, but I just learned really quick to wake him up, or to be like, oh, you know what? Even all throughout high school, there were moments where, we were in therapy once in COVID, and the therapist said to me, he said to Justice, do you feel like you could tell your mom? And I was like, oh God, inside I'm just like, oh God, what's going to happen here? And he said, Mom, when at 11 o'clock at night, you get this kind of idea to change all the furniture in a room. And I'm like, oh man, here it comes. And he's like, but your back can't handle that because you have got a bad back. And then you end up, it's taking longer, it's taking more time, and you end up sobbing and crying on the floor because your back is killing you. But I'm trying to help you do this because you have this idea at 11 o'clock at night. Let's just get this done. You know, and it's part of the control, you know, where it's just like, I've got this idea in my head. I got to push this idea, that creative thing that, and he just said, I don't know what to do with that. And I feel guilty because I can't help you through it. And then I feel the weight of it. And I just, it weighs heavy on my heart because I feel like I'm the one that's made a mistake. And I just, in that therapist's office, I just started sobbing. And I just was like, please forgive me for the areas in my life that I haven't let the Lord take a hold of, that end up in a moment where I'm trying to get something worked out. It has nothing to do with moving furniture, but it has everything to do with my own chaos in my own heart. And then I bring you into that swarm with me, and that's not on you. And it was so healing in that therapist's office because I didn't know he was feeling that.
Right.
But thank God he was honest enough to tell the therapist here's where some of my pressures are. And to be the parent that's like, you're the culprit for some of the pressure. It's like, oh, Jesus, forgive me for my own mistakes. And we do it all the time. And I think as parents, it's like, even parenting this younger generation that's coming up, I think they call it the alpha generation now. I think it's called the alpha. It's like, oh gosh, if we can just learn to just get healed, like just get healed, get free of our own stuff, so we're not giving another generation all the things that we're not able to let the Lord take. You know, how great that's going to be for them.
And though we will never be fully healed because healing is this process. But how powerful is it to when we realize there's still more to be done, to have those conversations with our kids of like, I blew that. I'm so sorry, because it gives them permission also to not have it all worked out yet. You know, to keep moving and understanding that it's a process.
Absolutely.
And what a huge skill to give to our kids of learning to say, this is what I'm feeling and this is what I need. And then allow you as a parent to apologize, to say, how can I be better at this with you? And continue to move, because you know, you also run the risk of, you know, that being that perfect parent that never lets kids see that we're all still human and we will make mistakes. And, you know, I used to think that my mom was just perfect and that put a tremendous amount of pressure on me. And then as I finally got older and saw some of the cracks, I thought, oh, okay, this is okay that I blew this. And so I think, man, what a powerful gift to be in therapy. To show like, I don't have this all figured out. And to be willing to sit and have someone help you get on the same page.
Well, you know, I had a really sweet conversation with the Lord too about just the whole role in this. You know, he just kind of struggled a little bit with COVID, and, you know, he's Black, so we had to go through the whole racial tension that went on through COVID and all that kind of stuff, which his name is Justice. So he's so equality centered. But, you know, when your child really doesn't have he said to me one day, you know, I don't want, he was a musician, but he's like, I don't want to do what you do. And I don't want to be on the stage like you're on the stage. And I'm like, you mean you don't want to do ministry? And he's like, yeah. He's like, I have no desire to do that. And I'm like, hey man, if there's anything that any way that I've ever made you feel like that was the way I needed you to go, let me just release you from that. I don't need you to do that. But there was this thing with him where it's like, man, how come he's not like, I'm more vocal. Like I'm a verbal processor. And so there are things that I'm like, I mean, I wish he was just more vocal about his faith and blah, blah, blah. And one day the Lord just said, hey, can I just tell you something from Justice's perspective? And I'm like, yes, that would be so beautiful, Lord. And he said, you're a lot. And I was just like, huh, what? And he's like, no, here's what I'm saying. imagine you having the parent that you are to him. Your parents were not doing what you're doing. He has spent his entire life watching you drape your heart and your life over people. There are people in your house constantly. I mean, I have to go up all the time and be like, hey, so-and-so's here for the weekend. They're struggling with this. They're going to be upstairs. You know, there's probably going to be some long conversations, blah, blah, blah. And Wardy's house is a revolving door of artists and creatives, some of them who are in between tours and who become family to him. And some of them are just really struggling with some stuff that come to the mother's house to... And so the Lord's like, he's seen all of this stuff. And imagine from a young person's perspective, the way that you cover, the way that you love, the way that you cook for people, the way he can't do that. Like that's not in his wheelhouse to do. And so to become like you or to be like you involves all of those things. I mean, during 14 years of the creative arts school I did, where I would bring 12 to 20 students from all over the world in for a week. They were in our house, and he was a kid playing with, Hot Wheels under the car, and he was hearing people cry and get delivered and healed, and people telling some of the most horrific things that have happened to them. And he was just in the midst of that. Yeah. And the Lord's like, you're a lot. Like, for somebody like Justice, who's an introvert and who thinks internally quietly, and you're his mother, and then his faith has to look like your faith. Like, that's a lot. Like give him the freedom to be able to find me the way that he would find me. Yeah. Because he's not going to find me the way you're going to find me. And that was so freeing for me, because I was like, yeah, like he's not verbal processing. It takes everything sometimes to get any kind of a, I used to laugh when he was a kid, because I would be howling at some of the things that we would watch, but he wouldn't crack but a smile. I mean, his big laugh was like, and it was like, that was your big laugh. But then, Coyote would get knocked off a cliff by the Roadrunner, and he would go into fits of laughter. And I was like, that's what you find funny? It was like almost like this weird sarcastic humor. And I realized, oh my gosh, he's beautiful in a way that's all his own. And it was so healthy for me as a parent, and so healing for me as a parent, to hear the parents of God, because I parented with the Lord, kind of come in saying, don't pull out all the stops that you think he'll grab what you grabbed a hold of. That's just not his way. And give him the freedom to find me the way that he's going to find me. And really, some of the most beautiful conversations with him about the Lord have been his perspective, and being like, wow, like that's actually pretty amazing that you saw him like that. You know what I'm saying? So I've actually learned the language, somebody else's language of finding Jesus. And it's not in any way, shape, or form in the way that I found the Lord. And, I don't know what your childhood was like, but my childhood was impoverished, uncertain. My parents were both dead by the time I was 21. And so he's never experienced anything that I've experienced. So the Lord had to remind me about that too. He's like, there's a generation of people that have never had that don't have that experience. You can't expect them to see me the way you see me, because you found me coming out of caves, and he just, he had somebody there constantly. And so it is, you just almost have to like bear down and realize, okay, this is a different scenario. And some of these young people, their stories are 10 times more traumatic than mine has been. But some of them are just like, no, like I come from a moderately well-off family, and we just never talked about God. You know what I'm saying? It's like, there was no need. There's no need for Jesus. And it's like, I was born in the dry lands, and I had a need to find Jesus.
You had a desperation.
I had a desperation
that pushed you.
Whew. And a father who was like certainly fueled by religion, but when your dad's coming to you saying, I've got a bad cold called cancer, but the Bible says if you pray for me, God's going to heal me. You're like, shaladabakatasa, when you're 7 years old, just trying to figure out how to heal your dad. So those are just drastically different circumstances in the narrative to Jesus than some of these kids today that, the football team that comes over and you're cooking for them and listening to their stories and you're like, yeah, you just go to church every Sunday. You've never had to really seek after the Lord. And I feel like the Lord's like, hey, Rita, don't try so hard to cover justice in some of these things that are his experience. Because if you try to pad it and then make sure that it's okay, then he can't find me the way that he needs to find me.
Right.
And I've had to be like, oh,
yeah.
I can't be in control of this, you know.
Yeah.
And he's got to have his own way.
Yeah.
And so
I think that's been the hardest thing as our children have gotten older is allowing pain.
Yeah.
And understanding that they can't have their connection to God through me.
No, absolutely not.
And when I step in to stop pain, joy, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm literally opposing what God is trying to accomplish in their life. And it's tough as a parent.
Yeah. Well, I think too, because part of us as mothers and obviously fathers, there is an inner thing to respond to pain. There's an inner thing that's Christ.
Yes.
Like that's what God does for us. That's what the Father God does for us. So those are prophetic and revelatory giftings that God's given us just as parents. But I always talk about the balance. Like balance is my favorite word in the English language because I always try to pull balance into everything I do. And there's got to be a balance to that. It's like, does Jesus sometimes stand off? I mean, the explanation that I started giving Justice is I'm like, look, because he was the dad, right? That's just how we talked. I was like, your dad, and I needed the Lord more in junior high and high school than I'd ever needed God before in my life.
100%, yes.
And so I just accessed the Lord in a different way. I was like, hey, look, your eyes are on him all the time. My eyes aren't on him. So I give you permission just to tell me what I need. I'd have God wake me up in the middle of the night, in the morning saying, hey, this is what he's struggling with. This is where he's hid this. It's in this drawer behind that piece of paper. I'm like, what? And so he ended up calling God the snitch. I was like, he loves you so much. And he's like, he's just a snitch. And I was like, I started getting defensive for the Lord. And I was like, he is not. You don't call God that. And the Lord was like, blah, 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 blah. No, man, let me be the snitch. Like, I love that name. And I felt like the Lord even said, he knows that I know. It's the best place for him to feel this. But in the midst of all that, there was this beauty of God actually coming in and it became the regular for Justice to realize. And I said to him, the glory, the beauty, and the sincerity of the prodigal father is that he loves you. And the reason that he's apprehending you like he's apprehending you now, I mean, I tell this funny story because it became comical to Justice and I, and we actually should have had our own reality TV show because it would have been hilarious. But, I mean, I don't know what grade it was in, but I found some Sleepy Time tea underneath his bathroom sink. And I was like, what is the kid doing with some Sleepy Time tea? And I, was just like, what in the world? I was kind of cleaning up the bathroom area. And I said, what is this? And I hear the Holy Spirit say, oh, he's trying to smoke it. And I'm like, Sleepy Time tea? Like, what? I mean, the YouTube stuff that's out there right now is insane. And I felt like the Lord started to laugh. And he said, remember when you were a kid and you would take the corn silk off an ear of corn and your brothers would dry it in the hot sun and then they would stuff it between paper and they'd try to smoke. And I'm like, oh my God, we would smoke corn silk, growing up in the backyard, thinking we were so hip and cool, And he's like, that's basically what he's doing. And I kicked the box down the stairs, and he was actually at the bar kitchen, and the box went tumbling down the stairs. And I said, hey, your father just told me you're trying to smoke this. That's why it's up here. And I hear from the kitchen, yeah, man, I tried to roll it. And I just started howling. And I felt like almost as I was laughing, the belly laugh of the Lord. And taking the like, oh God, what's he doing with a bag of tea? You know, kind of off the table and turning it into this kind of like, he's a kid.
Right.
He's stupid. He's just doing dumb stuff because he's trying to find a feeling somewhere. And so that storyline, I just sat at the base of the stairs and I'm like, Bud, what's going on with you? And we really had this beautiful conversation about the need to feel something different than the way that I feel. And I'm like, Bud, I think it's common that you're searching for a feeling. But if you keep looking for the synthetic, you'll never settle on the real.
Right.
And I'm like, here's a beautiful thing about the father. I said, the prodigal father is the guy that he's apprehending you. You call him a snitch, but he's apprehending you. I said, the time to tremble is when you ask for your inheritance and you go off and you do what you want to do. He says, because then he doesn't apprehend you. He just waits for you on the porch. And I said, I don't want you to get to a point in your life where your father's waiting on the porch for you. He'll wait.
Right.
He'll wait, Bud.
Right.
But you need to be so grateful for this season of apprehension because he doesn't let you get away with anything.
Right.
Like, I mean, the poor kid, I just was like, oh God, he's going to get caught. He's going to get caught. Next day he would get caught and stupid, dumb, teenage stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm like, dude, you're not, like, your name is Justice, man. You're not going to get away with it. And so it would almost be comical because I was like, Justice. And I'm like, you need to be grateful for the days of apprehension.
Right.
Because the days of porch waiting, you really don't want.
Right.
I said, he'll be there and he'll wait till you come back.
Right.
But when you come back with the shame. You come back with the reproach. You come back then having to deal with all of the things that you did. And I don't want you to give the enemy space to have that be your story. And it was really kind of a beautiful conversation where he was like, I understand, Mom. And so now when we have any kind of like, even college stuff, it's like, just remember the prodigal father and the apprehension of God. And even like, you talk about worship with Justice. He's such a great musician who doesn't want to be a worship leader, but it's influence, right? And so our conversations now are influential. So, he's a rapper and it's like, I love rap music. I think rap music is great. And I don't like the compromising of it at all, but I love what he loves. And I love that his DNA beats to a different rhythm. And he's just so articulate in the way that he finds all of this beautiful, I think he should actually score films because he's just so epic in his, what do they call it? Lo-fi kind of like beats and raps and, but some of the lyrics that he kind of comes up with and I'm never like, oh my God, you're saying this, you're saying that. I'm like, he's going to say this. He's a teenager. He's going to say all this stuff. And the Lord's like, please don't get disrupted by his own process of trying to figure it out. So we have these conversations about influence. And I'm like, hey man, when you're writing about this stuff, have you experienced that? He's like, well, no. I'm like, no, that's just somebody else's story, bro. It's like you're trying to tell somebody else's drug story. That's not your story.
Right.
So it's inauthentic.
Right.
And I'm like, do you feel like you have to be in this kind of thing in order to tell this? I'm like, that's a fake story. And I'm like, and who are you trying to influence? Because your little cousins think you hung the moon. But when you write those kind of lyrics and the influence has nothing to do with like just influencing your soul to actually breathe. I'm not talking about God or using the name of God. I'm like, you're fine using all this other stuff. And that's not even your story.
Right.
So it's actually really cool to talk to this generation on those terms, even in the lines of songwriting and worship leading. It's like, is your worship leading authentic? Because you're standing up there and you're telling a story about Jesus in these songs.
Right.
Have you ever truly experienced that?
Right.
Because your authority goes as far as your experience.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And it's like, if you're so ashamed of what you did the night before, that you're standing on that stage as a worship leader and you're I've seen you move, God, you move the mountains, you'll do it again. And you're like, you have no belief that God's ever going to it's like, that's inauthentic.
Right.
and the enemy is having a field day, changing the influence of our songwriters, so that the influence isn't authentic. It's actually this kind of borrowed influence. You know.
So talk to us about your mentorship. How do you help these young worship leaders if they walk in and they say, I'm a fantastic musician and I've got all of that down, and they walk in and they think, I've got it. How do you help them?
Yeah. Well, luckily in mentoring, a lot of what I have to do is I have to go on the prophetic. So I'll be praying for these people before they come online. God will usually tell me a few things. But I've realized just in...
So God is still a snitch, even with...
Oh, constantly. He's great. But doing DIVE, which was an acronym for Deep Innovative Vertical Expression, where I pulled these creatives in, and, they all came in with their giftings and their talents. And I'm like, I don't care what you're gifted in. I could care less how you sound. And most of them come in as that as the crutch, right? But the reality of it is their hearts are just smeared by all of this stuff. And I didn't think that what I was doing at that point was almost like a disassembling school of the character that they thought I had, they thought they came in with, or the talents that they thought that they came in with. I went after the heart. I went after the blood vessel that almost burst in the minute they got there and said, yeah, God's not looking at what you offer him in gifting. He's actually looking at the intention of your heart. Where's your heart? Where's your heart focused? And then all of a sudden you get, I had a week with those students, and you get, some of the stories I had to actually maintain. Thank God I had so much acting experience in my youth, because I had to actually maintain this kind of neutral zoned face when I was listening to some of the horrific details of these kids' life. And I even remember thinking at the end of some of these things, I need to ask for this kid's mother's number or father's number, because I'm going to call that, just the destruction of character and just some of the things that would go on. And it made me very aware, even now in the one-on-one mentorings, that you are not dealing with a worship leader per se who comes to the table pristine and knows what they do. You can have all the gifting in the world, but there is always in us this realm of what they really actually function with and what tools they're actually bringing to the table, as opposed to what they feel like they actually have to offer. And that's really what we go after in that. Some of them, it's like I give them the floor. So it's like, hey, this is your time. What do you want to know? And my first kind of session with them all is trying to find out what it is they burn for, as opposed to what they're gifted in. Because I think we toss the burning and the gifting around. And the burning is what ignites your actual passion for what you're gifted in. And most people don't know what they burn for, because they're like, well, I burn for songwriting. No, that's not a burn. That's a gift.
Right.
Burning is the actual intention, like what is fueling this thing. And most of the students that come in, they have to actually look in the area of their attack to find out where their burn is. Because most of the time, I would even say 100% of the time, that if I'm, like for me, when I figured my burnout, it was because I understood my attack. I was constantly riddled with discouragement and constantly torn down by hell, that I didn't have what it took, blah, 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 da, da, da. And I realized, because I burn for courage. I throw courage on people when I lead worship. And when I realized that, it was like, no wonder I'm being constantly riddled with this. No wonder this is always after me. So that has been kind of the biggest power piece in the mentorship, is to equip them with an understanding of their actual burning. Because if you understand what you're burning for, then all of a sudden you become the captain of your ship.
Yeah.
And you know that, okay, God's the one that's actually steering this, but I'm here to assist the Lord, and I'm not taking a back seat to this anymore. You got so many people in ministry that are Jonahs asleep in the bottom of the boat, because bad behavior has overtaken their lives, that they don't no longer want to hear the Lord. And then they're bringing destruction wherever they go because they're running from the calling and they're running from the burning. And I really feel like what God's called me to and what I have so much passion for is to actually equip these leaders and these creatives with an understanding of what it is they're actually capable of. And if they have an understanding of what they're capable of, and that the fact that, oh, that's why I'm hunted down by hell all the time. It's like, see that gifting? That's why he's constantly using that sin to destroy that gifting. And if you keep giving that over to hell, then this is the end result of what hell, because you're going to be taken out of your position, you're going to be taken out of this, and hell will be like, done it, did it. And so it's an equipping of that. And then when they actually see that, then I think it creates this roadway to be like, okay, so what is your greatest, push in your team? I really wanted to raise up a songwriting culture. Let's raise up a songwriting culture. You want to know how to do that? Let's do that. I really want to create synergy in our team. It's like, oh, you really want to do that? Let's do that. Okay. But we can't really get there unless we get to, well, tell me what you're burning for. Because if you don't know what you're burning for, you don't even know your own authority. And if you don't know your own authority, you have no ability to actually follow through with this stuff, because your own insecurities will actually take you out before you even start the process of these fundamental things you want to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's been life-changing for worship leaders. Is there's nobody in the church that's really doing that for them. I wish we had people on staff that really just did a once a week or a once a month kind of thing where these worship leaders could come in and be like, okay, what's going on? What are the 5 main crises that have happened this week or this month in your job, in your position as a worship leader? And what has brought you to a point of despair or brought you to a point of just frustration and all the, and just let them vent. Be like, this. Okay, that stuff is your crap. So let's now talk about how we're going to deal with that. Right. Don't take that into this.
Right.
And don't take that conversation into this person. That has nothing to do with that person.
Right.
You're mad because of this. You know what I'm saying?
Right. They need a space
absolutely.
to be held. They need to be heard. They need to be encouraged. They need humanity. They need connection.
Yeah. And I think when you guys pastor a church, you're putting these worship leaders, the first face that they see on Sunday mornings, and they're supposed to lead hundreds and thousands of people into the presence of the Lord. Some of these leaders are like, they don't even know if they can carry the presence of the Lord.
Right.
And that, I just am like, oh God, we've got to get to the point where the enemy stops disabling the heart of the worship leader. And so that we can free up the worship leader to have the authority to stand on the stage and be like, oh, if you guys aren't going to come, I'm going. So you either follow me there or I'm going. Right. But I'll lead, and you will feel the missing out of where you're not ready to go with us. Right. And I think that that's my passion in mentorship is to because these are 20-something leaders. They're in their 20s. Yeah. And I'm like, come on, let's get you, and some of the language that I use, some of them are like, I've never heard anybody talk about that kind of freedom. And I'm like, well, it's a shame. It's really a shame in the church. Nobody's ever told you have the right to be free, and then free again, and then free, and then free, and then so much free. Because the Bible says, to him who the Son sets free is free indeed, which means freedom is a cycle. Right. To be free, 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 and then to be free again. It's like this world's going to offer you crap in 12 months. Right. Some of that crap's going to stick. Right. I don't know if crap is a bad word on this podcast. No, we're okay. So they'll bleep you out if they need to. So I mean, all that to say, I just am like, my passion as one who's been in that role for so long is I'm going to go out waving banners in balconies and being like, I'm in your corner. And I think it's so scriptural because I always refer back to this, but when my nieces were really young, early college age, they came out when I was living in Charlotte. for a week just to hang out. 2 of my siblings' kids, 2 girls, and we just hung out. And they were, they had kind of really started really engaging with the Lord at that time in their, 19, 20-year-old age bracket. They're both married now with several kids, but they asked questions. They just kind of, they would just be like, so what about this? And when God says this in scripture, what about this? It was just kind of sweet and innocent. And I had said to them, hey, look, I'm your cheerleader. I've done this thing. I've done my 20s, done my 30s. I'm like, I'm just in your balcony. When you need help in the journey, just look up. If you think you're going to stumble in the journey, look up in the bleachers.
Right.
I'll have a cue card with your name on it, and I'll just be like, you can do this.
Yes.
You can do this.
Yes.
And they wrote me this letter together when they left. And I opened this letter up when they were gone, and they said, Aunt Rita, we love you so much, and thank you so much for taking the time this week. But we just wanted to say, we love that you want to be in our balcony, but we're asking that you run the race with us. And I just thought, wow, that's powerful. I'd never heard that response before, because I'm so okay being in the bleachers.
Right.
And I thought, wow, that's scriptural. That the old and the young can do this together, and that the role of the elder is to tell the younger, you are amazing. You are so beautiful. You are God's design. You could do this. There's nothing He hasn't equipped you for that you can't accomplish. You can sing better than me. You can sing brighter than me. Your songs are going to go further than mine. And to be even that kind of a musician, because let me just tell you, in the entertainment or the role that I'm in, it's a very rare thing for someone that's a few years older or gone a little bit before to not feel almost like, oh, somebody's coming encroaching on my space. Somebody's come up. And I mean, I've been in rooms where I've sang, and people that I looked up to, like women that I looked up to as singers, couldn't say one word to me in my youth because they were not going to expend or give anybody anything that they weren't. It's like I was
a threat.
Competition and a threat.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling that and thinking, I will never, ever cost another kid the ability to know what they're worth in a moment. And so it's just, I maybe I'm one of a kind in that way.
I hope not.
I hope not either, but I'm telling you, in this business, it is so hard to find, even still stepping onto the platform and feeling, even when I open my mouth to sing and I still have the ability to do it. And I'm like, meh, whatever. I'm kind of like, meh, for me, I just don't get hung up on myself, but you can almost kind of still feel, people that are just maybe 10 years younger than you that are like, oh my God, I'm still a threat to that person. And I'm like, I want nothing to do with that.
Right.
And so, they used to call me, even in my 20s, now you see or now you don't, because I hated the competitive thing so much that I would sing my little thing, blah, 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 and then I would like fly out the back door because I just didn't want to hear what people had to say. And I didn't want to have to be in this thing where it created competition among other worship team members, because I was always this voice that nobody else had, which set me apart. But it was also, in the industry, I was told, oof, we don't know how to put you on Christian radio because you sound like Sheryl Crow, and that'll wound Christians. And I was like, when did Sheryl Crow, what I'm saying? But apparently my voice was too secular. They said, your voice is just way too secular. So I always felt that I was ahead of my time in a lot of certain things. And so in a lot of these things, I think that the Lord has given me a understanding for, and a heart for, and a grace for. And maybe it's just to teach that, don't be like this, don't be like this.
Right.
And I tell young people all the time, don't hold so tightly to your vocation that you forget that there's a young person coming up behind you that's learning underneath you and just wants to catch a vision and wants to be seen by you.
And we're all temporary, no matter what our vocation is.
Yeah.
But God's kingdom, God's plan is not.
Yeah.
And to hold someone back
Yeah.
because of the fear that they're going to take something from you, your focus is on the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Like, God is your source. God has a plan for you. And when he's done, he's just done with that portion of his plan for you.
Yeah.
There's still more. And
Well, there is maybe, this is probably the last thing I'd say about that, because I don't know how to articulate it, and I try to articulate it to a younger generation. There is a power on courage that I have never encountered on anything else. That when I've chosen to do that and be more enamored with a generation that's not my generation, more unraveled by somebody else's gifting and talent, and then pour everything into them and be like, no, I don't have to do anything. You come on and you do it. There is a power that I've found in the spirit that is almost like this. It's almost, I can't even find words for it. And the only thing that I can set it in is that when Jesus, even in the New Testament, when he tutors and he trains the disciples, and you think 12 of these guys, one failing at it, and then the addition of, some of these other brilliant men, but all of these thousands and thousands of years, the amount of courage that he poured on those, it's their lives and their words that are still what's feeding us today.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, that is power. Like, that is power. And if we could come into holding things so loosely and being so grateful for the Lord for what he's given us, but not gripping so tightly to something, because when we grip so tightly to something, we miss out on the road or the journey that God has for us, that are places that I've been able to go, that I don't think I would have ever been able to go if I'd gripped so tightly and been like, no, I'm going to ride this wave out, and see how far I can go or so high I can climb. And I just, the power of learning, the more behind letting go.
yeah.
And the beauty behind less. It's not going after obtaining more in your gifting, but going after, no, it's okay. I can humble myself and pull myself back and let this person go ahead of me, and then they get the record deal. Or and sometimes it's like that.
Yeah.
They get the tour, and they get the this, and they get the this, and my road's been like, nope, I don't want you on that tour. But that's my breakthrough. What are you talking about? Like, if I got to be on that tour, like, it would break through my music. I'm asking you not to say yes to that tour. I'm just, and then you're like, you miss out on that tour, and you realize that your career's taken a 5-year hold because perhaps but then all of a sudden you hear stories about what happened on that tour, and you're like, oh my, like, years later, you're like, I was like, oh my gosh, I would have lost my whole life if I'd have gone that tour. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So yeah, I probably would have pressed ahead but God knows where I would have been, you know? And so there's power in that position. And it's the less than position. But
So like Jesus.
yeah, I mean, man, if you humble yourself, I mean, what is the word says, humble yourself so that he can kind of raise you up.
Yeah.
And him raising you up is just, it looks different than man raising you up.
Yeah.
I'm just telling
Yeah.
you, so.
But the reward for that.
Yeah. It's like,
Way
it's
outlasts.
not going to be in a check. I'm just telling you, sometimes it doesn't come in a check. Sometimes it does for people, but it doesn't come in a check. It's this really, deep breath and sigh of like, I've done this as unto the Lord. It's right with my soul. It's well with my soul. I did this as unto the Lord. And that is clarity. You go to bed at night and you're like, we're good. You know what I'm saying?
And legacy.
Yeah, that's legacy. That's how you
It's
build legacy.
It outlasts
Yeah.
us. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well, Rita, wow. I feel like
sorry, I was like,
I should write you a check for
No.
everything the education that I just got from you. And
well, thank you so much for just even asking these questions.
Yeah. What a joy.
Yeah.
To be with you and to share to have you share insight has been just incredible. So thank you so much for joining us at the table. And we will talk to you again soon.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's great.